Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us today for 10 ways to simplify your cyber GRC efforts. I'm Mike Andrews of Yastis Cybersecurity Consulting in Las Vegas, and I'm here once again with Karina Clever of Clever Compliance, as well as our guest Jesse Miller of Power PSA Consulting. How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing fantastic. Super happy to be here.
Awesome. So Karina, before we learn more about Jesse, if you could briefly tell us in the audience about you and your business.
Sure. I am Karina Clever. We're with Clever Compliance. We are a compliance management as a service advisor. We're tool agnostic, actually. We help people create that glue between their screen and their governance program so that they optimize and really get security usage out of their GRC programs. And then Jesse, how about you?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, guys, as I mentioned. And I'm Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting and creator of the Power Grid vCISO system. So what we do and what the Power Grid vCISO system is all about, because I'm sure this is the first time some people are hearing about it, we help MSPs, MSSPs, consultants, vCISOs create efficient and scalable vCISO programs through an operational process that spans the gamut from go-to-market, positioning, pitch, sales, onboarding, service delivery, and customer success.
That's awesome. So Jesse, can you briefly tell us what problems, opportunities led to you starting Power PSA Consulting to do this work? And if you could tell us briefly one of your success stories.
Yeah. So I think I always tell people this is a short story long, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. So it really starts at the beginning of my career. I was in carrier service operations for National Telecom here in the US. Did that for 8 years, and the .com bubble put a quick end to that when that downturn happened. So at that point, I had become a Cisco routing and switching guy and went back to school, got my degree because I went right out of high school to this job, and started in managed service land, working for a managed service provider. So helped them scale that business up to about 75 people and 8 figures in revenue. And along the way was tasked with building a cybersecurity program for them. And this was back about 12 years ago. So we were early in that, for managed service providers to be doing cyber, becoming a true MSSP was pretty unheard of back then. So in any case, built this, enterprise best in class cyber stack and realized that nobody wanted to buy it. So had to go back to the drawing board. And that's really when I discovered, GRC or vCISO as the why for cybersecurity. And so when we implement that as the lead off to our cyber offering, not the, add-on, we found that all of a sudden customers really started to understand, this governance thing, this vCISO, this cybersecurity strategy, a risk-led approach. This makes sense now why I need to do vulnerability management. It makes sense why I need to do data protection, right? And so that was the unlock, and the business really started to flourish. And so fast forward to the end of that, the business was sold. I went and worked for the acquiring company for a year. And then about 3 years ago, decided to found Power PSA Consulting because I was looking around in the industry and still understanding that, these managed service providers and consultants in general still don't have a good grasp on what it takes to deliver scalable and profitable vCISO services, right? So it was a big problem that I saw. There was no one else solving it. And so I said, this is either a really good idea or a really bad idea. But, kind of took a flyer on that 3 years ago, and fast forward to today, we have about 50 different organizations that we're working with, helping them build successful vCISO programs, and then in turn, helping their customers do cybersecurity the right way. And you wanted a success story.
If you have one. I'm sure there's many.
Yeah. The most recent one that comes to mind is we had a vCISO professional who has a small vCISO business join our program. Very, very accomplished risk professional, right? This guy does not need help with delivering a cybersecurity program, but where he was looking for some assistance was in the go-to-market positioning and sales portion side of things. So of course, that's the part where our system starts. So he implemented that in his business, made some changes to the way he positions and prices and packages. And within 3 months, he had closed $420,000 in pipeline, right? And much more on the way. So he's hiring now, just got a new office. And so we're really excited for him.
That's awesome. I followed your content for quite a while, which is why we wanted to invite you to join us today for this webinar. And it's really good, really helpful, really genuine. You can tell you really want to help. So thanks again for joining us. So now we have a bunch of questions for both Karina and Jesse that we're going to get to, and then I'll add some context. We're looking to keep it around 60 seconds per person per question, so that way we can cover a lot of topics, since the audience may care about one area, but not so much about the other one. So we'll start with a couple of baselining questions. Karina, so how would you tell the audience is the difference between cybersecurity and compliance? How do the two differ? And we're getting a little bit of feedback on your end, so I'll mute as well.
You are now? Okay. Is it still there? It's better? All right. So cybersecurity versus GRC. GRC governs everything. It governs all the departments. It governs all of your tools. It governs all of your vendors. It governs everything. It governs your data, especially, right? And what you do with that data and how you relinquish that data to someone else. Cybersecurity is about really protecting that data, protecting those assets, protecting your perimeter, making sure that your users are aware of what they can and cannot do. So cybersecurity is really great principles and practices of how to support your GRC program. So your GRC program is going to go out to your HR group, your legal group, right? All the way across your entire organization. The most important thing is to make sure that the controls that are in your GRC program, it's important to align to regulations and frameworks, but you want to make sure they're reflective of your real true operations, because otherwise your risk management becomes irrelevant, ethereal, and you're really doing this unnecessary busy work on these checkbox compliance exercises of 12,000 rows that have nothing to do with your true operations. So bring it back to the basics.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jesse? How do you look at the difference between cybersecurity and compliance?
Yeah, I think Karina hit it on the head. I guess you guys, we were talking and people find this out about me. I'm a pragmatist. I like to boil things down, right? Even to a fault sometimes. But to me, I think about, strategy is the why. As I mentioned, strategy or risk is the why. Governance is the how. And then cybersecurity is the what, right? So governance kind of gives us the processes and how we should be doing these things to accomplish the goals that we want. And strategy at the top and risk at the top is then influencing the why, or why we actually need to do this thing called governance. But then cybersecurity is really the outworkings of the technical and potentially personnel disciplines that we're enacting to actually create controls against systems, people, and processes, right? So, simplified GRC, I think maybe that's our next question that we want to get into, is like, what does simplified GRC mean, right? And so I love that question, because that's what I want to do. I want to simplify it. And so I'll lead off. I'll start with like the opening salvo here and say that I think simplified GRC means just stop the navel gazing, stop the circumlocution, to use a $10 word, and really just focus on how do we do the things that we need to do. That how, right? Tell me how. That's simplified GRC to me.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. When I think of simplified cyber GRC, I think baking your efforts in, rather than having all the other departments in your company work on something, and then they come to you when it's all done and say, "Here's what we did." Put some security controls on this. Because that's never going to be as good as if you were in the meeting working with them. So, Karina, how do you think about simplifying cyber GRC?
I'm still looking for it, right? So, folks, we've got this overwhelming force on all of these companies who want to do GRC. They want to be compliant, but then these consultants come in and they're like, here's this really long spreadsheet. And I actually pulled up my presentation for my SACA last week. We use words like hypernym, hyponym, definite definitions, in control, inherent properties of objects abstracted into characteristics. These are controls that real companies are told that they have to follow and adhered to by these companies that they trust, that come in and say, well, we're going to be charging you 10 to 15 million for the next 3 to 5 years because you don't want to get fined.
Right.
Well, send me the fine by the federal regulator instead of you fining me doing this busy work that I don't even need to be doing, right? And so what we're doing right now, what we're seeing in the industry is this very top-down approach. Even a lot of the GRC platforms, there's over 1,000. I think that they're incredibly well-intended. They start with these top-down approaches of these are the controls you have to abide by, but what we're missing is this bottom-up match. We're given these gauges and we're given these controls that are, and we're told as companies that we have to do this, but really there's no appropriation to our actual real operations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when we get that magical moment of looking at the basics of what we really do, figuring out how to actually align those functional controls to that top down, disassociating the things that really don't have anything to do with us. And it's true because there's a lot, 21 CFR 135, 115, biotech, right? It says if you make goat milk ice cream, you have to use goat milk. What if your company doesn't make goat milk ice cream? Why is that on a checklist that I have to go track? Right? And it happens all the time. So I think to me, simplification is really bringing it. We've overcomplicated this because it created a lot of money for the industry, right? Let's create some big, busy work. And meanwhile, we are losing 93% of the population in the US. I'm going to say it again. This is HHS numbers, has an active investigation going on right now of their PHI and EPHI that's been neglectfully stored to where it's breached, it's hacked, it's lost, it's people have accessed it. That 93% of this is our addiction, this is our toenail fungus, this is our my boss is crazy, I hate him, this is my I want to kill myself, this is my my baby's sick, this is my I got cancer because I had bad habits, or whatever reason I got cancer that you might tell your psychologist. People do self-blame games, right, all the time. So these are all our most intimate secrets. 93% of the population has had their data neglectfully stored. And I think this is a crisis that we need to be talking about. But meanwhile, let's continue on with these 12,000 row checklists that don't bring anyone any security or any data protection measures at all.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Throughout my career, I've found when companies are doing way more security controls than they need to, or they ask way more questions of you, it's often done because they don't know what they truly should be asking. So they figure if they just throw everything against the wall, the right answer has to be in there somewhere, but it is super inefficient and it wastes everyone's time, and it's just not good. So to get into the 10 ways specifically, which is the focus of this webinar, the first one we want to talk about is what can a company do to get stakeholders in alignment on cyber GRC? Because any practitioner in the field knows you can be great at your job, but if the other stakeholders don't care about this stuff because you didn't convince them or you're not giving them the information they need, things aren't going to go well. So Jesse, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think workshops around business processes, working towards like an incident response plan and getting people involved in that. I think it's a great way to get started and get kind of a positive note on the organization, talk to everyone, build consensus around the why we're doing this, right? So I think sitting down with different departments and saying, tell me how you do business, tell me about the data you process, tell me about the things you do, tell me what you absolutely need to do your job. And right now you're making it important to them. So the function of this exercise is for us to sit down with you and understand what can you not live without. And we want to protect that. People, they'll be like, oh, I want to help with that because I need this thing to do my job. Okay, great. We understand that. Roll those results up, bring that to a steering committee and or leadership team, and then do a workshop with them to make some decisions on prioritization, right? Then we have that bottom up thing that you talked about, Karina, right? Linking up with the top down governance, and we publish that to the organization. Everyone's been made aware of it and they're kind of in the know and there's consensus built. And then we walk the leadership team through, not a tabletop exercise, but saying, hey, let's pretend there's a ransomware incident. Raise your hand. You're the incident commander. That's what you have to do, right? So I think that's a really easy way to start building consensus.
I want to add really quickly to tabletops. Here's what we're seeing right now with the material breach, 4-day SEC requirement. Come up with some sort of a code word on your subject line and make sure that your HR, your vendors, your legal department are all looped in, because here's what's happening. Most of the technicians on the front lines who are actually getting all of these alerts and doing the investigations and performing the containment, right, and doing the impact assessment to the business, to the data, they know that they're going to drop something into legal and it's going to be 45 days later. Right. So what are they doing? They're picking up the phone and calling SEC. Hello, SEC? Protected by whistleblower laws. So now, what I implore you as part of your tabletop exercises, of course, is great to be ready on all kinds of different fronts, but pretend that you're having a material breach. Run it all the way through and see if it ends up in 4 days on the other side, because you're talking finance. Who's filing that 8K, right? Make sure those people are prepared. The legal department's prepared. If there's any vendors that they're prepared, you have a notification method kind of already in place. That's what I want to have to, that's what I kind of want to say about the drills there.
No, those are really good points. And as someone that's been in the military for 21 years, exercises are a massive part of how we train and how we assess how we do, and ultimately how we improve over time. And that's no different in cybersecurity. A couple things I would add on here. It's important to show how the cybersecurity and the GRC efforts can benefit each stakeholder, and that's best done when you speak in the language they care about, because the CEO cares about certain things that the CTO may not care about as much, and vice versa. And by speaking in their language and showing them how it benefits them, they'll do it, because ultimately that's how you convince anyone of anything in life. You have to show them how it benefits them. Pretty much. So moving on to the next question. So we know cybersecurity, we define the difference between that and compliance, but we also have to account for business friction, because we're there to support the business. We can't just add 1 million security controls and it slows everyone down, but we sit there feeling good about it because things are safe. So Jesse, what do you do to help companies with this stuff while taking into account the business friction and keeping it minimal?
Yeah, I think it's a term that I get a lot of crap for, but I always want to say I want good enough security. That's what I want, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, synthesizing the business risk, the compliance needs, all the things that we care about. I just mentioned our crown jewels, right? Understanding what's important to us and what our risk tolerance is for downtime, fines, everything else. And then meeting that with the exact amount of commensurate security and controls to get just that done and no more. Okay. So you talk that way to a CFO or a CEO, they're going to be listening. All right. So I think that's in a short way, the easiest way to start minimizing it is thinking about it that way and stopping what I call, being Professor Perfection, the technical person who says they don't care about security. They got to do all the stuff and the things, to understanding we just have to enable the business to move as fast as it needs to move without crashing. Brakes on a race car is a great analogy for that, right?
Absolutely. I agree with that. A lot of things in life, that's how we view it. Like even the landscaping in my neighborhood, no one's doing the best landscaping they've ever seen. They're doing it so it looks acceptable, so no one makes fun of them, and the HOA doesn't give them fines. I mean, Karina, what do you think?
So I'm going to add to that. Please do an alignment of data to the business. Many times we'll walk into companies and I'll say, where's your data? And I get a blank look. They haven't classified their data. It's all over the place, right? They don't understand what impact which data pocket has to the line of business. They don't know how to do customer anonymization. They don't know how to do all of the consumer privacy things are just woefully being neglected right now. A lot of people don't know how to actually stand up consumer privacy workflows in their native ticketing system. And that's something we actually specialize at with Clever Compliance. So I really implore everybody to just bring it down to the basics. And then now that you have your data identified, Now you can wrap the controls around it. The data access, privileged access for more sensitive data. The DRBCP, you're not going to recover everything, but you want to recover the most important stuff, right? Incident management, you want to focus on the stuff that's most impactful to the business. Everything else can wait till tomorrow, right? I mean, so it's this prioritization and all of these operational logistical considerations that really need to be kind of bring it back down to the basics. Look at the data first. Oh, and we're encrypting publicly available information. Why? Why are you spending money on this? Like, I mean, come on, folks. It's absurd. It's absurd. Okay, that's all I got.
Exactly right. And when it comes to compliance, most companies aren't doing compliance because they feel like it. They're doing it because someone else is asking or requiring them to. So the next question is revolved around laws, regulations, guidelines, standards, and even complying with contract terms. So how would you say that businesses can quickly manage this stuff so that way a change in a regulation, for example, isn't just throwing them, into chaos mode? Jesse, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I love the saying that governance isn't it's a program, not a project. And so I see, you see a lot of people who get in that chaos cycle of it's audit time and we grind the business to a halt for 3 months while we prepare for it. And then we get that done. We forget about it. The same thing goes and happens next year. So I think the way that they can be prepared and shift is make sure that it's a managed program, right? Whether you have somebody internally that's managing that or you're outsourcing that, having someone who's a VCSO or a cyber advisor, strategic leader in your organization who owns that and is constantly helping shape and plan for business initiatives based on those requirements is going to save you a world of hurt. And like I said, stop that chaos cycle of your yearly compliance audit.
How do you think about that, Karina?
We call that passive evidence gathering. And actually, the thing that really hurts that are ethereal words. So when you go download a template for a policy or a procedure or a standard or whatever you're using in your company, and you don't even have that documentation governance process in place, those templates are full of very ethereal words. Sometimes, occasionally, periodically, once in a while, when we feel like it, right? So maybe to you, frequently as once a quarter, to the next guy, frequently as once a month. The auditor comes in and he's like, well, to me, frequently is once a week. Where's your evidence? Right? So you're leaving yourself open for this unnecessary subjectivity. And way back in the day, people used to think, well, if we don't commit, the auditors can't get us on anything. And that actually is becoming a very self-defeating governance purpose, right? So you want to know you're pulling something once a week, because then you can build that API, you can build an AI workflow, you can build a ticket workflow that says, give me this evidence once a week. You align it up to the competency area. And now that's already passively being gathered, sometimes without humans even needing to interject. So when the auditor comes in, if your data is scoped correctly, according to regulation and framework, now all you do is you have that portal instantly available for them, and they pull the evidence they need. And the instructions you need to give them is, don't talk to me or my staff, because not all technicians need to be in front of an auditor. Don't talk to us until you've gone through all of the evidence that we've made for you. And I'm not talking about a very painful, flat, overly flowing virtual folder that is just unorganized and impossible to find any evidence of. Align it up to your competency area and your true policy statements that talk about real frequencies that you can actually automate, and then over time collect that evidence for.
That's really good insight into what companies should do once they know something needs to be done. But what I find with working with companies is they don't have the data sources or the alerts in many cases to know when there was a change. Like I've recently worked with a new client, reviewed their programs, and then they weren't accounting for something that was went into effect like over a year ago, and they said they just didn't know. So I think it's always smart to set up alerts from like NIST, ISACA, maybe even a Google alert for certain keywords. Like if you're a fintech company, just have an alert for the word PCI DSS, and then you'll get some notifications and you'll look to see if it's important. And if not that, you could always set up like a quarterly review to where you're just going to sit down and maybe even just ask AI or just do some Google searches to see if you missed anything, because these things aren't going to pop up and say comply with it tomorrow. You normally have a lot of notice. And if you go take the time to, even an hour can make a big difference and help you find something new that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one. So we know something needs to be done. Then it comes down to deciding which security controls need to be implemented. Karina, I know this is a big one, and you're the control wizard. I mean, your business is largely focused on controls. So how do you think about this and helping companies decide which security controls they need?
So we use a thing called N to the fourth. And so the ends, actually there's an N to the fifth. I'll get to that in a second. N to the fourth is when you take that big old honking spreadsheet, that 12,000, 7,000, 15, 58 million row spreadsheet, whatever that is. And you basically sit down and you come around a conference table and you hold hands and you order some food and maybe sushi and pizza. And some companies like to pray before we start this, and that's okay, right? And we basically sit down and we look at that incoming spreadsheet and we categorize the buckets of the spreadsheet into one of four kind of sections. Now, next, near, never. So are we doing this now? Get the credit for it. Make sure the documentation is updated on it, right? Gather that evidence passively. Make sure the controls are well written so you can do that automatic evidence gathering long term. Next, we want to do this, but we're not ready for it just yet. That goes into a project plan. A project manager is assigned. It's prioritized. We have a timeline associated to it. Near, this is in your strategic roadmap. This is maybe 3 to 5 years from now, right? It's a quarterly kind of bullet on one of those future targets, which may require your now and your next controls to be executed. And then there's never. That's the last N. And never is, we're not going to do this. This is a goat milk ice cream idea, right? This is, sure, we're biotech and we have to adhere to 21 CFR, but we don't make goat milk ice cream. So we're going to exclude this one because there's no sense in tracking it every single year. Now the fifth N, so now we now, next, near, never. And so the fifth N is actually new, which is the one that you were talking about, Mike, before. When that influence, when that regulation and framework makes a change, high trust, love high trust, working with high trust, they come out with updates all the darn time, right? So now I need to put an assessment to determine whether or not that updated set of controls applies to me, yes or no. So now, next, near, never, just keep that in mind, and to the fourth. And when you're internalizing into your company those influence documents, the regulations and frameworks, make sure that you kind of try to appropriate them that way.
That's great info. I always look to you for that sort of insight, since you've been focusing on that for a long time. Jesse, how do you handle that discussion?
Yeah, I love the alliteration. Number one, I'm a big fan of that, so I'm definitely going to use that. But I think you're right in that, like, the prioritization is key. But going back to what I mentioned with the incident response planning, like the crown jewels and having those defined, like, at the end of the day, it's almost become trite, but I want to understand what the business outcomes are. So let's dig in on that a little bit. I want to understand what the goals are for the business, whether it's acquisition, growth, profit protection, market expansion. Like, what are these things that need to happen? That's, of course, got to be synthesized with our regulatory landscape. Like, what rules do we have to comply with? Are we, punitively encouraged, let's put it that way, to comply with? And then blend all of that and say, now what controls are needed based on the risk that's posed, on a quantitative measure, to say, okay, now what do we need to do, right? So looking at, again, that good enough security lens, that's how I want to prioritize. And I think a lot of times that can be based off of the data. So going back to what Karina was saying, if we understand that, restricted or the highest level of data, depending on what your classification scheme is, this needs to be protected no matter what with this standard set of controls. These are non-negotiables. Confidential has a less amount of controls that we need to do. Internal, exactly, and then public. Why are we encrypting the public-facing data? We don't need to do that. So I think a similar framework to the way Karina thinks about it. But again, I want to tie that to what does the business need and make sure that's the lens I'm always looking it through.
Yeah, that's really, really important to do. I think the other thing that's important to keep in mind in this discussion is that this is a negotiation in many cases, because us as the GRC practitioners, we might look at the frameworks and look at how we think things should be implemented. But when we present it to another team, they're often going to kick back, and they should, but they shouldn't just look at what you sent them and say, okay, great, that's what we're doing, because you're almost never going to be 100% right. And then when they object, then you could either decide that something doesn't need to be done, or you could say, yes, it does need to be done. Oh, okay, you don't want to do it that way, or we can't do it that way. Well, let's have a compensating control. Let's do it this way. Or maybe we shouldn't collect that data for a while because we're not prepared to protect it properly. So,
just as an add-on to that, I mean, I think as risk practitioners, right, our job is not to necessarily make sure everything gets done just right. I mean, we wish it would. That's why we're in this business, right? But our job is to make clear the risk decision to the stakeholders so that they can make an informed decision about whether to accept or mitigate that risk, right? And then there's transfer and avoid, of course, but just they have to make the risk decision. They have to own the risk of that decision. Our job is to make it clear for them, right? And then at the end of the day, we do have to be okay with the business may say, well, we're just going to roll the dice and take our chances because we think it's going to be all right, and then we have to say, okay, I've done my job in showing you what needs to happen. And you've said, okay, we're going to take the risk of not doing that. And then I say, okay, that's, we'll be here to pick up the pieces if and when it blows up in your face. Right.
Yeah, that's really good insight. Like just like 3 days ago, one of my clients, they showed me this new application they had, and the CEO, he had his set security controls correct, but I noticed the number 2 in the company didn't. So I sent her a text and I said, hey, can you at least turn on 2-factor authentication? That would really help. And she said, Mike, do I have to? I'm like, you should, and it's in the policy. And she goes, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll do it. But while we're on the topic of risk, some companies view risk in the context of their annual risk assessment. Getting some feedback from one here. They look at it in terms of their annual risk assessment, but not day to day. So when thinking about managing that risk on a continuous basis, Karina, what do you think about that? What can companies do to simplify their efforts when it comes to seeing what risks are evolving in their purview?
So there's 2 types of risks. There's the ethereal risk. I might be in Boston, a brick might fall on my head. We might have somebody post something bad on social media. There might be reputational risk. There might be some emergency that happens, whatever happens, right? Those ethereal risks, yes, we have to plan for. We have to be good business owners, and we have to make sure that our clients are also prepared for those things that may happen. Maybe they're not likely to happen, but at least we know, and that's going to feed into our GRBCP plan. The risks we really want to know about, and the ones that are incredibly valuable to us, are the ones where our controls appropriated to our actual operations fail. So that failure, when that control is well written, and we know that we should have pulled a report every week, so the example I always use, change management. Our change management policy, one of our controls says we have a CAB every week. Okay, well, we didn't have one last week, and we didn't have one the week before, and we didn't have the week before. These are failed controls, right? So now we start looking, why are these controls failing? Well, Bob's out, and we have change request stacking is one sort of risk, versus nobody submitted any change records is a different type of risks. Now maybe we want to change our control to say we have a CAB every other week, right? So we can make true decisions based on tracking our actual controls that fail. And this is so much more important than those ethereal risks. Ethereal risks are important. I'm not negating them. And most risk management programs are built on them. But when our controls are written the right way and we know they've failed, now we can have more actionable things. Now, I'm going to mention Barry, one of the smartest men literally on this planet. He did go ahead and pose a question on DACRA. So DACRA is a risk management principle that says, I'm going to take it's kind of leaning towards those real true controls, right? I'm going to do an assessment of my true operations, and I'm going to be able to show reasonable. and I'm going to be able to do my quantitative and qualitative assessment, but show how it relates to my company specifically. So that's kind of leaning more towards actually actioning your failed operational controls. But again, if you haven't defined them, and if you're working off of that ethereal checkbox compliance spreadsheet, it's going to be useless data. It's going to be just more busy work noise in your operations that people are spending time on, that you're spending money on licensing for just to do a spin.
Yeah, I think listening to that, right? At the end of the day, we have to understand that risk is an inductive exercise. And I think things are going to always change. We're not ever going to have a perfect set of information. So we have to make a decision against risk with the best information that we have available at the moment. And so how do we get the best information? One is, right, technical controls, getting feedback on our systems. Are they working right? But I think the other piece is then education and collaboration within the organization, which we've always already talked about. So making sure that we make this, we're in, if you're a CISO and you're talking to the board, that you're injecting, risk discussions and making sure you're helping get the cyber risk integrated into the business risk register. And if they're not using a business risk register, helping spearhead an initiative to get that done, because I've seen that as well, right? But doing those two things and creating it as an ongoing process and helping everyone to understand that this is inductive and we'd like it to be perfect. This is a barometer, right? So are we heading in a positive direction or a negative direction is a really good way to think about managing risk in the organization.
That's some really, really good insight. What I would add, it's good to structure the way you do this in a way where you can make small adjustments over time. Like, especially when I've worked with larger organizations, sometimes we'll find certain risks and we'll report them, and they'll say, "Oh, great information. Yeah, we'll deal with that in the next software release that's coming out in 18 months." And it's like, okay, great. Glad we agree that that's a risk. And the other thing I would say, it's good to be careful about having too many alerts when risks pop up, because if you have 10,000 alerts a day and you can't handle them, it's not that useful. So it's good to set those alerts up in a way where the important stuff is prompting you in a way where you can see it quickly and deal with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. The whole idea of we have a risk register and it's just littered with like 50 risks. Like, we're never going to do anything about this. We need like 12 maybe, so. Yeah.
So one of the things I also want to mention is we're seeing a lot of tool overload, right? So tool rationalization is becoming a very real thing. We have legacy systems where we have technicians come in to work and they have 1 tool, 2 tools, 7 tool, 9 tool, and then each one of these goes and sends them an email. And we're creating these ADHD sort of environments where, and we complain about cybersecurity burnout, but what are we requesting our people to do? I mean, it's absurd for them to try to, manage 3 different help desks and prioritize without even knowing where the most important data is. And then we have these job positions that are locked down into a particular tool. Like, people will not hire until this person, the candidate, knows the tool, which might go away in half a year. And it's like, and that's this weird entry point, right? So we have to really carefully think about, we're struggling with single sources of truth. We're struggling with actually knowing which tool is the most important. And not only that, a lot of these tools, their source data comes from the same exact spot. It's just a different UI, but we're forcing people to work on. So one of the simplification critical areas is rationalize your tools and stop for a minute and say, hey, what's my manpower lift on actually managing this tool? What's the value of this tool? Is the vendor providing the SLAs like they told me they would when I first signed the contract? And really, what's my impact to my business? Is it providing this value add, or is it just this noise that I'm needing to maintain and lift like a cross on my back?
Yeah.
Oh, great point. So speaking about vendors, that takes us into our next question. How can a company decide whether they should handle something internally or outsource it to a vendor? Jesse, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I love the approach of our best documented processes are the ones we can outsource most effectively. So I think if you have something that's hyper repeatable and modularized, you can lift and shift that to anyone, right? So I think just quick answer, I'll let Karina weigh in. Makes things that are already documented and very repeatable, you can outsource those.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a little bit more elaboration. I think that because that's so this is the equivalent of I've got a few things on my grocery list, but instead of walking to the store, which is 5 minutes from my house, a walk, I'm gonna crank up the rocket ship and I'm gonna fly there, right? I mean, it's just absurd to expect a lot from those that we outsource to. And I'm going to completely support what Jesse said. You're going to need to weigh in your budget. You're going to need to weigh in your priority. You're going to need to weigh in your team's capabilities. Maybe they're not really good at auditing, liaisoning with an auditor that comes in. Maybe nobody really ought to be in front of the auditor. And there's been plenty of coaching sessions that we've conducted. And it's a true thing. There's a certain type of person, right, that's really good in front of auditors. So there's priority, there's cost. And then a lot of the compliance management as a service is really about they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the skill set. They don't have the money. They don't have the time that they can dedicate. Potentially they're a CISO that's extremely technical. They made it up to the board. They're now a CISO and they're told, now you got to do compliance stuff too. They've never looked at it. They're a tool person and they love tool stuff, right? Yeah. So then what do you do if you're accountable for that? Okay, we'll take a piece of your budget. Let somebody else build that compliance program for you. And it might be a great thing if you already have a conflict of interest organizationally to have somebody external come in and take a look at your operations from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes there's value to have a third party involved, even if you can handle it internally, because you may get information that's more unbiased that can help you improve over time. I would also say it's important to realize what's core to your business and what's not, because if something's core to what you do every day, you might not want to outsource it, but it's just something to think about. And then also, it's good to crunch the numbers and see if the way you feel is accurate, and also to continue to do that over time, because something might change. Maybe the company's 10 times bigger 3 years from now than it was. It pays to crunch those numbers again and maybe course correct if needed. So moving on to the next one, we talked a little bit about exercises earlier. Each of you have a tip for training and exercises that the audience might benefit from. Karina, we'll start with you on this one.
I think I already provided my most important one is the Securities Exchange Commission drilling that I think is most important. Also, there was an article that I wrote published in the February edition of Cyber Defense Magazine. I took the cover opening a position and it was on the wildfires in LA, right? And so the real kind of impact to doing business continuity and really drilling it. People didn't know that they had to check into the office. People didn't know, companies didn't have employee contact info. There's just a lot that went really, really wrong. So drilling disaster recovery, having those internal, external templates, it's just so important to keep check of how you're going to manage an emergency.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we talk about having a culture of security, and that's a bit of a misnomer, in my opinion. I think you want to get the most out of your end user training and security awareness training, build a good culture that people want to protect, right? So I don't know if people are watching this are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it talks about the different levels of self-actualization for a human being. And so, the first need is, food, water, shelter, psychological safety, sense of belonging. And then finally at the top is self-actualization. So if you want people to self-actualize the cybersecurity controls you're putting in place, maybe focus on building a company they actually want to work for. So I think it's a broader culture thing to really get the most out of your cybersecurity training. But the nice thing is that you get a whole range of other business outcomes from that as well. And I think that speaks to exactly how we want to approach these types of conversations with the organization.
That's great insight. Just to add a few things, it's good to do it more than the minimum. Like say you're required to do it annually, just do it a little bit more than annually. It's
Yeah.
also good to throw the training out in some different ways, like maybe a CBT once a year or twice a year, and then you send out some bulletins every month. But what I like when I'm helping clients, I like to actually see how they're being targeted when I do the audits, write that down, and then build the training to show them that. Like if I see the HR department getting targeted in one way, that's going to be in their training, because nothing hits closer to home and gets users to realize that stuff's important, like showing them how they're already being targeted. It's not a hypothetical, this is happening today.
I think one thing I want to add to this is we still have humans sitting making decisions at the keyboard, right? Even in a crisis situation. And when you have a document that says periodically, they don't know what that means, right? And so when you're trying to provide instructions for an emergency situation, drill that emergency first and run it through so that words like that are removed, because they don't know that if they have to do a command for a backup, they don't know what periodically means. Do they do it every 5 minutes? Do they do it next week? And that kind of mysterious sort of language compounds a really bad situation, because in a panicky situation, people just need to follow instructions. They're not going to get creative. They're not going to go look somewhere in the back. What did we do last week? And oh, maybe Bob's house isn't burning down, so let me go ask him, right? You need to give really specific, clear instructions and make sure they've seen that document before an emergency situation. And Lord willing, no one ever pulls it out, but know where it is, not on a binder sitting on some shelf collecting dust, right? Not in some shared folder, so-and-so left 3 years ago. Nobody reset that password. Nobody can even get to that document anymore. Drill it actively so that there's no guesswork in case of an emergency, because in a panic, people aren't very creative. They just need instructions.
Great input. This next one is arguably one of the most important ones. It's one of my biggest concerns in a lot of my clients. Third-party risk management. You can be great at cybersecurity and compliance in your own company, but if you have vendors, that can be kind of like a black hole in a lot of cases. So Jesse, how do you handle third-party risk management, and how can we simplify it?
Yeah, I think number one, you have to be realistic. You were talking about biotech, Karina, and especially with pharmaceuticals, a lot of these third-party relationships took years to build, right? They're the only game in town to manufacture your formula, and that you can't go anywhere else. So what do you do about that? I think there is where you have to be. How can we simplify it? Is we have to go further than maybe we think we should to help them protect their own environment, right? So doing things like running attack surface management against your vendors and helping them do vulnerability management against their own attack surface is something you may have to do. And, looking at it, it may be less work than just constantly sending them a questionnaire and asking them to fill it out and then, clutching your pearls and saying, why aren't they doing this the right way? So again, pragmatic solutions say, like, let's help them level up their cybersecurity. And I think that's a real way to approach it that can actually yield some good results. So your mileage may vary. You have to make those decisions on a case-to-case basis. But I think in certain industries, when you don't have an option, you have to just help kind of as a community uplift your vendors around you.
It's very true. Karina, what do you think about that?
I'm going to really try to keep this short, but this is one of my most passionate topics. All of them are passionate, but this is like at the top of the list, because I think really this is our biggest risk in our environment. First, I want to really do a quick shout out. Please log your APIs and maintain them, because there are APIs that we've seen that are 7 to 9 years old that are sending data to a company that doesn't even exist anymore. So please do a check on your APIs, right? Now, vendor management very quickly. Not all vendors get the same questionnaire. There are 4 tiers to vendors. Start with that. You may have more. The one that doesn't, again, data, one that doesn't get any important data, one that gets maybe sort of important data, one that gets all of the important data. This number 3 vendor is your most important data. And the 4th one is they're never going to send out, fill out one of our questionnaires. These are your AWSs and your Azures that make SOC 2s available to you. You still have to have standards as far as your highest level criteria. Start with 4. You're overcomplicating yourself when you send a completely irrelevant non-risk vendor 800 question questionnaire, right? So don't do that because it makes everybody's life crazy. Now, review all of the documents, contracts. I've actually read contracts where in the same exact one document at the top, it says, you're going to get your data back with a 30-day notice for some money. And at the bottom of that same exact contract, it says, there's no way in hell you're ever going to see any of your data back. Heads up. So please review those contracts. Those are the binding arrangements. Review the terms of service. Review the privacy policy. SOC 2s at the very top say, subservice organizations are not included. So when we send your data to one of our vendors, not it. Sorry, right? Breach notifications, lock those in because they're very ethereally written most of the time right now. Ask about access controls, ask about cyber insurance, ask about where they're keeping your data and how many subservice organizations they're using for your data management. We do not have enough guidance from a regulatory and a framework perspective. There's only usually 1 or 2 controls about vendors. A lot of these regulations and frameworks are incredibly aged and they don't go into detail on really what to ask of that vendor. But it is one of our most critical areas for us to hone in on as a industry. I'm going to add one more thing really quick. I know I'm past my 60 seconds. I just did an assessment of a national insurance company, health insurance company, very deep dive assessment by one of our clients, and 4 URLs removed. So there's one page that led to a link that led to a link that leads to a link that's a document that basically says, dear patient, if you download our app on your phone to look at your information about your appointment and your blood work and all of these things, we are not responsible for any PHI on that app because we use a vendor to get that data transferred back and forth from your phone, and they always go down. So we're just not responsible for any of the PHI or any of the data that you see on our app. But you have to download our app to make your appointment.
That's good input. The only thing I'll add on this is to realize, like internal conversations, dealing with vendors is also a negotiation, right? Like if you send a vendor a 200 question checklist, for example, and they're just not responding to you 3 times, maybe you could say to them, okay, I really want to know about these 5 areas. Can we have a 15-minute phone call? And most of the time they'll say, okay, fine, if that'll make you happy. That's it.
So let's be real. I mean, what's the best way to streamline efforts with third-party risk management? A good incident response plan.
Yeah.
But even that, if you don't know what the triggers are, how they're going to notify you,
right.
What the alerts look like, right? I mean, you still have to manage that actual relationship in your continuity plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have that addressed in the incident response plan, as well as who you're going to notify, if you have a breach, because we're vendors for some other companies. And then with that flow down agreement. So if you're telling your clients that you're going to protect their data in one way, the flow down agreement can say that your vendor will too. A lot of vendors won't agree to that, but sometimes it works. We are getting to the end of the hour, so we'll combine the next 2 questions. So how can we use automation while also doing quality work? And then to combine with another question, as part of our continuous improvement efforts. Jesse, if you want to take this one first.
All right, let me see if I can package this all up for us. So automation, right? You can't automate what you don't have a process for. So how can we automate while doing quality work? We can create modular, small chunks, small steps. I think you said earlier, Mike, right? Document those, get those automated, get them off our plate, and start eliminating that tech debt, and that'll snowball. I'll stop there and I'll let Karina weigh in.
You have more than that.
Okay.
I'm getting hungry.
So
yeah, go.
Yeah. So I'll say, how can we continuously improve over time? So that is part of what I just mentioned, right? We have to think about how we fit in to the organization's goals, right? And that's kind of a theme that I've been pounding the table on this whole hour, right? But really, how can we improve over time is we can think about how does our job function in the organization contribute to the goal? If you've read that famous manufacturing book, right? The goal is to make money and to make a profit. And so how do what we do contribute to that, and frame it in that way and seek to continuously align ourselves in that frame? And I think we'll just get better and better over time, and we'll be more, what we need will be more and more well received over time as well.
Okay, my turn. All right. Okay. I thought you wanted to jump in. How about you answer that question? No. All right. So it's a continual cycle. If we have our controls well defined and those controls are lining up to our regulations and frameworks and giving our functional operations the instructions that they need at an exact level, getting rid of those ethereal words, now we can do the automation, and then we cycle through. Not only are we getting audit ready, not only are we getting certification ready, not only is all of our cyber insurance stuff going to be in place for getting that policy bound, we're also going to kick off risk management at the same time, and we're going to manage the risks that are most important to us and improve upon those controls. So really, the heart of it is controls and those workflows and those templates and those tools that you're using that you already have. Probably way too many. So look at that as well. To actually cycle through and do that rinse and repeat, exactly what Jesse is saying at a governance level from my perspective.
Really good input. Just on automation, I believe Jesse mentioned this a couple of times, but make sure you have a good process before you automate it. There's a lot of compliance automation platforms out there which can help, but you always got to be careful when you're going from not doing something to automating something, because you need to have that expertise to make sure things are going well and just make sure there's nothing missing. And then as far as continuous improvement, it's important to have really good communication with the different stakeholders throughout the organization, because you might think something's going well, but if they think it's not going well, that could lead to trouble. And simply just asking them if things are going well, and then taking that into account as you're evolving from year to year.
Great.
So to wrap us up, we always want to be actionable. We're talking about a lot of different concepts, how to improve, how to simplify things, but we do spend our days helping companies do this stuff. So Jesse, if you can just briefly tell the audience how you can help, depending on what type of business they are. Yeah.
Well, my business is enabling service providers to better serve their customers with risk and GRC programs. So, I think how I'll help SMBs and businesses over the next 24 months is continue to enable MSPs, MSSPs, and consultants to build profitable VCSO programs. And what I mean, that profit is not a dirty word. It's what I like to call a virtuous sales cycle, right? Virtuous sales funnel, where we give the customer exactly what they need, while we get paid very fairly to do it. And, that's how it should work. And that's what we're helping MSPs do.
That's a great point. And profit is important, because if a company doesn't have profit, they may not even stay around to help customers. So if they have all this knowledge, but they can't help anyone because they can't put food on their own table, it doesn't help anyone. Yeah. That's really, really good. Karina, how about you?
I'm going to do two quick PSAs first. Please do not put pictures or videos of kids online. Any kids, you're opening them up for identity theft, and you're creating a digital signature for them they have not yet opted into. So let them do that when they hit 18. So please be very mindful of the data. Lock your kids' social security numbers down just like you lock your own, because virgin social security numbers are a real thing and they're very popular. The second thing I want to say is we do have a scheduler for RSA. Myself and a whole bunch of our team is going to be in San Francisco this coming week. And it's very simple. Calendly/ Clever Scheduler. So just send us, go find some time to meet us for coffee out there. Clever Compliance, we are compliance management as a service provider. We are also known, some people call it CMSP, compliance management service provider. We establish GRC centers of excellence. We do risk management. We do vendor management. We do readiness liaison remediation for audit certification, cyber insurance. We do framework alignment, GRC planning and forecasting, GRC training, a lot of that, and then also consumer privacy requests.
That's awesome. At our company, we focus on helping clients find where they stand today by doing risk assessments to find the risk, and gap analysis to see where they're lacking, depending on what they need to comply with. And then we help them by making recommendations to improve their security controls and their documentation, so their risk goes down while compliance goes up. And I think that's all of our topics. There are some questions to get to.
We'll respond to them.
Okay, yeah, we'll go in the comments. So Jesse and Karina, thanks for joining us. Jesse, can you tell the audience where they can find you?
Yeah, you can go ahead and check out, let me get my finger there, powergrid.group, POWERGRYD.group. That'll show you what the Power Grid's all about. You can find me on LinkedIn at all times of day. So send me a DM if you want to chat. I'm always there and happy to answer questions.
And I'm at Karina at clevercompliance.com or www.clevercompliance. We don't even say www anymore, do we? Clevercompliance.com, and shows my age, or also as well on LinkedIn. Please follow Clever Compliance.
Yeah, and to keep it simple, you can find me on LinkedIn every single day by looking up my name, Mike Andrews, with 2 E's, ANDREWES. And thanks again, Jesse and Karina. And for all the questions that are already there or the ones you'd like, just please put them in the comments and we'll make sure that you do get an answer. Within the next week or so, you should see an announcement about our May webinar live on LinkedIn. And thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Hope you find it informative or at least interesting, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.